Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're talking about the type 8 leaders, and we're asking the question, can they be good leaders? And the answer to that is fairly obvious. Of course they can be. In fact, there's probably more type 8 or maybe type 3 leaders as CEOs of companies and organizations around the country than maybe any other type. So the real question should be, can type 8s work for a leader, work for someone else who is a leader? Because type 8s naturally are going to gravitate toward leadership positions. I don't think 8s are always going to seek out leadership, but they're going to be promoted and pushed forward into leadership often. They may very well seek out leadership positions because most 8s I talk to have a hard time thinking of themselves working for other people, especially people that they think are incompetent. So today we're going to be talking about the type 8 leaders. Type 8 leaders are the big thinker type people, big picture people. They want to know what is it we're supposed to do and how can we get it done, period, bottom line. Then let's do it. Then let's move forward. Let's not give a bunch of excuses. Let's not get bogged down in red tape. Let's not get bogged down in bureaucracy. Let's not get bogged down in following a bunch of made up rules by people who aren't here anymore in this company. 8s are going to tend to think, what's the objective? Once I understand the objective, then let's go accomplish it. Let's go get it done. They're not going to seek, maybe they're not going to be inclined to seek a bunch of awards or a bunch of prestige because of it. They want to control their environment, and they don't want their environment to be controlled by others. So if you give them the freedom to get their work done, they're going to get their work done. Give them some leeway, give them some permission, and they're going to get stuff done. They're going to detect when people are not being honest and not being direct and not being straightforward. And it's going to bother them. A lot of what they do looks like anger. A lot of their emotions sometimes get translated into anger. 8s want to deny their own vulnerability. They want to think of themselves as strong and competent, and they're going to deny anything within them that feels like it's weakness. And they just will forget that about themselves. And that way they kind of forget themselves because they get out of touch with anything that seems small or insignificant or weak. That feels unpleasant and will just hinder them from being productive. And so they identify with their strengths and they identify with getting stuff done. They wake up in the morning, they don't think about, do people love me? They don't think about, am I a person of worth? And they don't really sit and run a lot of strategy in their heads before they move forward. They are just inclined to take action and then think later. So action comes first, and then thinking comes later, and then last comes feeling. So they're an action type, a body type, a gut type, and they're going to go with their gut, with what they believe is right at the time, and they don't want to be hindered and hemmed in by a bunch of established rules or regulations that are going to keep them from being productive. Once they know what the goal is, or once they establish in their mind what the goal is, then they're going to want to move forward to accomplish that goal. And they have a great ability to motivate others, to empower others. They lend their power, or they sort of share their power with others, and others are empowered by them to accomplish that goal. They'll step first, and they're decisive people who will take action and step out first, and so other people are willing and inclined to follow 8s because they look confident. Because they are confident, because they deny their own weaknesses and deny their own vulnerability. So when you shut out your own weakness and vulnerability, and you believe yourself to be strong, and you identify with strength, and you're opposed to injustice, and you want to protect the common man, and especially those that are on the inside of your relationships and on the inside of your fort, they look like they have a lot of boldness and determination. And 8s are bold and determined people who don't sit around wasting a lot of time worrying about making the skeptics happy. They know what they want, and they move forward and get it. They have big appetites. Their sin, of course, is lust, and the way that gets translated is intensity in everything. And so if we're going to argue with intensity. If we're going to accomplish a goal, we're going to accomplish it with all of our intensity. We're going to deny our weaknesses and stay up late, and we're going to hammer after this thing until it's accomplished. The intensity may be in how much food they eat, or how they exercise, or when they go on a diet, that it consumes their mind and their actions, and everything in their life will be set aside in order to accomplish that goal, or to stay on that diet, or to achieve that that goal that they've set before them, or that change in their life that they've set before them. So they work hard, they play hard, they may exercise hard, or they may sit down to a meal and eat a lot, because they're going to be big, bold, intense people. Even though they may be small in stature, they're going to carry a certain size about them. When they walk into a room, they are assertive types. 8s, 7s, and 3s are the assertive types that are going to walk into a room and they're going to expect that I'm here now, so let's get this party started. Let's get this project going. Let's get, they feel like that since they showed up now, the lights are on in this room and people need to move and people need to act and things need to change. 8s are going to get frustrated when they see an organization, or they see a company, or they see a business that isn't doing well, and people are trying to be careful and not hurt others' feelings, and they see the profits declining, or they see the attendance declining, and everybody's being careful so as to not hurt people's feelings. 8s just want to call it out and say, here's what the problem is, here's what needs to happen, here's what needs to change. I'm sorry it hurts your feelings, I'm sorry you don't like it, but it's time for you to get off and leave, and it's time for you to move aside and let somebody else. And 8s just see all of the shenanigans that are going on, and they want to cut through all of that, and they want honesty and truth, and they want fairness and justice, and they want just the people to quit playing games, and people would just do what they ought to do if people would just keep the main goal and stay focused and not worry about all of these side things and hurting people's feelings. Then they could accomplish what they set out to accomplish. And so 8s are kind of like sledgehammers like that. They just come into an organization or into a family dinner, and where everybody's trying to be careful and not say something that's offensive and beat around the bush. 8s just want to throw it out there and believe that if we could all just be honest, if we could all just be direct, if we could all just say what we mean and mean what we say, everything in life would be so much easier. And so let's talk about a list here of some character traits that I think will help 8s be good leaders. First of all, what's on their radar screen? Remember, every type is looking around with their radar screen, assessing something, and for the 8s, I think what that is they want to know, who's in power, who's really in power, not who has the titles, but who is everybody looking to as the authority, who has the power, and are those people using the power that they have in a way that benefits the organization, benefits the common man, that benefits everybody. Are they misusing their power? Then they need to be called to reckon for it. Are they misusing their power? Then they need to be called out and they need to be dealt with. Are they using their power appropriately? How do I gain power? And then how do I use that power to empower others or to help others? How do I create a power base and then use that to accomplish what needs to be accomplished, what needs to be done? And again, they're very big picture oriented, so they're going to come back to, what's the purpose of this company? What's the purpose of this organization? What's the purpose of this church? What's the purpose of it? Then let's quit playing games and let's get settled and let's get real about this, and let's mean what we say, and let's do what we say, and let's not play games. So 8s are going to be leaders, and they're going to be sometimes scratchy to people. They don't intend to hurt people's feelings. They just intend to get things right and get it done. But people are sometimes going to be set back by the intensity and by the focus and by the power of the 8. And sometimes they're going to be, upset and hurt and angry at the 8. And the 8's not always going to understand why. They're going to think, why would you be upset with me? I'm just willing to say what needs to be said. I'm just willing to do what needs to be done. And they may not realize that they're coming across so direct, so harsh in other people's perspective, or so combative. And in some ways, I think the big lesson maybe you could take away from this video today, I know we haven't got even to the list yet, but one of the things I think you could take away from this is probably, when it comes to 8s, is the one thing that you're going to have to learn is not how to be a leader, because you naturally will be. That's your strength set. Your superpower is power. Your strength is strength. Okay. What you're going to have to learn throughout your life is how to moderate that strength. It's how to temper that strength and use only what's necessary, and not to overuse your strength or to overplay your hand. So when you think about like Superman, for example, Superman can do everything. It's ridiculous. How can anybody get in a fight with Superman? He literally shoots lasers out of his eyes, blows ice out of his breath, can spin the world backwards and go back. Go back in time. It's ridiculous. He can do any. Bullets can't stop him. The only thing is kryptonite, right? So it's ridiculous. He's got every superpower you could possibly imagine. X-ray vision. It's just ridiculous. It's an overkill, right? But if you read through Superman comics, or if you care anything about Superman, what you'll notice is the big problem for Superman is not how do I get this job done or how do I overcome this enemy. It's how do I moderate my strength in order to fit the situation. And I think in some ways, 8s, that's your real challenge, is how do you present only enough strength necessary to move forward without isolating people, without pushing people back, without scaring people, without creating conflict, without creating enemies, without creating more frustration for yourself. Is learning how to moderate that strength and how to be gentle. How to be gentle. I remember one episode of Gilligan's Island where he ate some radioactive spinach seed and he could crush everything and pick everything up, and he was trying to learn how to drink, out of a coconut milk out of a coconut, and every time he'd pick up a coconut, he'd crush it because he was too strong. He'd just crush it all. And 8s can kind of be like that, They don't know their own strength. You don't know your own strength or realize your own strength, and sometimes maybe you bring more strength, what's the word? Not more strength, because strength is a good thing, but you may apply that strength to without as much thought as necessary. Okay. Because you act first and then you think later. Okay. Then you think, well, was that really the right thing to do? Or you act and then you wonder, I wonder if I should have talked to my wife before I made this decision for the family. Or I wonder if I should have talked to the bank before I made this decision. Okay, so let's talk about some lists of strengths, and this comes from the 9 Types of Leadership by Beatrice Chestnut. Type 8 leaders' core characteristics. Number 1, big energy and big presence. Big energy and big presence. 8s are tend to be very energetic people who can be imposing. Even little Danny DeVito, I think, is an 8, right? And so think about Danny DeVito, the guy off of Taxi and off of so many shows and TV shows. Small stature, but a big personality, big, imposing, going to get his will known and made and get what he wants to happen in life. Although he's very small in his physical stature, he's going to make a big impression, and 8s are like that. So big energy and big presence. Not afraid to work long hours to get their stuff done or to get done what they care about. Okay, number 2, 8s have a can-do mindset. 8s have a can-do mindset. In other words, 8s don't wake up wondering, I wonder if I'm able to do this. I wonder if I've got the ability. It's never a question of their ability. It's, will other people get out of the way? Will other people create so much roadblock and headaches for me that I can't accomplish this? And you might see 8s quit, not because they don't feel like they're capable of doing it, just because they don't want to put up with all the nonsense of the people that are withholding them. So 8s get the job done, quote unquote, no matter what. If you give them the permission, in a sense, if you give them the keys to the company, they're going to get the job done. No matter what. They have an enormous confidence in themselves because they shut down anything that seems vulnerable or weak or sad. They tend to shut that stuff off and not pay attention to it and not focus on it. That's what they want to move away from. Just start talking to them about being a little kid and watch them start to get nervous. Talk to them about what it was like to be a little kid and to feel like that they were being taken advantage of, or that they had to grow up too soon, or that they couldn't control their environment and somebody was getting the better of them and they decided that they weren't going to let that happen anymore. And that, that's the lesson that they took away from childhood, is that they needed to grow up. That not like a one who needed to parent themselves, but they needed to grow up and they needed to be powerful so that others couldn't hurt them or take advantage of them. And you might say hurt them or take advantage of them any longer. All right, so, or maybe they need to grow up in order to take care of somebody else. Maybe somebody else was coming along in their family and they felt like maybe their parents weren't there for them and they needed to grow up so that they could take care of, which is a very 8 thing, to be this powerful, strong person who has this soft, gentle inner core that wants to take care of and nurture, the little ones that are under my care, the little ones. All right, so they have an enormous confidence in themselves, and they assume that they can do anything they put their minds to. They don't sit around and wonder, I wonder if I got the ability to do this. They just kind of look at it like, absolutely I could do it. Why couldn't I do it? Okay, number 3, powerful, strong, and fearless. Well, you can see those are going to be great characteristics to take into leadership. I mean, that's what makes you a leader, is confidence, right? You have a plan and you step forward and you just believe in yourself, and that's what 8s naturally do. Powerful, strong, and fearless. No problem owning their own authority. Now, I'm a 7 and I'm close to an 8. I've got that 8 wing. It's not my strongest wing, but I have that 8 wing. But I know as a 7, I'm still in the thinking group, not in the action group, and it's hard for me sometimes to, to own my own authority. I want to sit and think and, spin and ask questions and, I'm doing it right now, kind of wringing my hands, thinking through all of what could happen, and then I try to work with people in terms of like flat line management, like we're friends, you want this to succeed, right? So how can I motivate you? 8s, they don't do all that stuff. True 8s don't have a problem coming in and saying, you need to have your work done by 8 o'clock. You understand? Not 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock. If you have a problem with that, then we can deal with it right now. And 8s, they can just, I admire that ability to just lay down the law and just lay down expectations, to know that you're in charge, and then to just communicate that. I think people, want that. As long as you're not heavy-handed about it, I think people long for that. They want the lines to be drawn and the expectations to be drawn, and they don't want, somebody trying to just hem and haw and hint around at what they expect. They want somebody to give them clear expectations, and I think 8s provide that in a good way for their in their environment. If they're healthy 8s will provide that in a good way. Decisive. All right, number 4, 8s are decisive. Again, something that I need to lean on that 8 to be a more decisive person, more decisive leader, because of my thinking first, I can always, well, what about this scenario? What about this scenario? What if this happened? Well, what about that? And then as a 7, we always like to keep our options open and have escape plans and keep everybody happy and keep everything, light and encouraging. 8s, they're willing to just move over here and follow their gut and say, man, I know enough. That's the right decision. That's the right choice. And they might be a little heavy-handed in it, and anybody who doesn't agree with that ought to be, they might be a little heavy-handed with that. But I can admire and appreciate that ability to say, this is what we need to do. And they'll believe in it, and they'll start moving forward, and they'll start working toward that goal and accomplishing it without that indecision, and indecisive leaders can be so frustrating. It's frustrating to be a leader and to know that you have a tendency towards being indecisive. And I know it's difficult and it's frustrating to try to follow a leader that's indecisive, because they're always moving the goals, to try to keep people happy. Well, when you're an 8, you don't necessarily care about keeping people happy. You care about getting junk done. You care about doing your best and getting stuff done and protecting the little folks, And so you know what the goal is. And once you identify the goal, then people are either on board with you or they're not. But when you move the goal, when you're indecisive, it's very frustrating for everybody. So again, something I need to lean on more in my 8 wing and just say, here's the goal. We're not apologizing for it. We're not making excuses about it. We've identified it. There's our target. That's what we're shooting for. Everybody on board, then let's go. Any questions? See Lorraine outside the door. Pay the lady outside the door if you got any questions. Pay the office person out front and get your check and go home. Here's what we're going to do. Being decisive is a very important, element of leadership. And 8s don't have a problem making tough decisions. They're willing, they trust their instincts. They don't doubt their instincts. They've learned, to not doubt themselves, right? So they don't doubt their instincts. All right, next, unafraid of conflict. How important is that in leadership? Anybody that takes on a leadership role can expect what? Conflict. Anytime you say we're going to move in this direction, then you got the opportunity now for people to criticize that and people to challenge you on that. And if you're afraid of conflict, then you're going to move back and forth. You're going to be what the Bible says, a double-minded man, unstable in all they do, a double-minded person. And 8s are just not going to be afraid to look you in the eyes and say, no, we're not doing that. In fact, it's probably their first instinct is to say no. Hey, would you mind if we move these boxes over here? No. Hey, would it be okay if HR uses room 114 instead of no? An 8 can just look at you and say no. No, that's a real answer. So many of us have such a hard time, just looking at people and saying no, having good boundaries. And I think 8s are going to have good boundaries. They're going to protect their boundaries, right? And they don't have a problem with conflict, by and large. They don't have a problem with conflict. They trust their ability to handle conflict. Conflict isn't bad. Conflict isn't a bad thing. Criticism isn't a bad thing. Conflict just needs to be managed and needs to be handled. And if you're, a 6 or a 7 or a few of the other types, you might really have a hard time want to back down from conflict. 9s hate conflict, 2s don't want to get into conflict. So you might want to back down in the middle of conflict and try to hear every side and give everybody validation and all that. But then there's a time when you just need a leader who will say, I'm sorry, we're not doing it that way. And then he keeps going forward. And everybody goes, well, okay, that's the way it is, and that's the way we're going. And that can eliminate so much conflict. I know as a dad, we have 5 kids, and I remember when they were little, and I would try to be nice by leaning into the back of the van and saying, hey, where do you guys want to eat for supper? Man, that was a mistake, because now I got 5 little voices all screaming for their restaurant. One of them wants to go to McDonald's, and the other one says, if we go to McDonald's, I'm going to kill myself. I hate McDonald's. I won't eat anything. I'll eat anything but McDonald's. And then another kid says, I want to go to Fazoli's, which is a little fast food Italian place. I want to go to Zaffoli's, because they say it wrong. I want to go to Fazoli's. No, I want to go to Chuck E. Cheese. That would always get thrown up. We're like, we're not going to Chuck E. Cheese, all right? And what I would do is, by trying to be compassionate and loving and, open-minded and all that, I'd end up creating conflict, because I'd give them too many options and they couldn't handle the options. And they'd get to fighting with each other, and then somebody'd be crying, and before you know it, it would kind of ruin the whole thing. Well, an 8 just would say, here's what we're doing. We're going to Burger King because we've got coupons there. I don't like Burger King. I don't want to go to Burger King. Fine, then you don't get anything. Okay, I guess I'll eat something, And so you don't have a lot of conflict because you deal with it and you're not afraid of it. And so there's a great benefit in having somebody like that, having that hammer, in the organization that just deals with it and says, sorry, that's not what we're doing. We're doing this instead. Unafraid of conflict. They often manage it head on. And they're not afraid to go after somebody where there might be conflict and tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, I heard you got a problem with this. You want to talk about it? Let's talk about it. instead of letting it just kind of stew over here in the corner, and the person then goes and builds a coalition, and then the coalition starts to make their demands, and formal complaints. The 8 might just go after them and put it into it and be done with it. All right, and the last thing on my list here is honest and direct. Honest and direct. And all the 8s said, of course. Why would you do anything else? Well, look, if you're not afraid of conflict and you're all about the big picture, right, and you're decisive, then of course be direct. Just be straightforward, look people in the eyes and tell them exactly what you think, tell them exactly what you mean, shoot them straight, and you expect people to do that to you. But you see, if you're not so decisive and you don't like conflict, like if you're a 9 and you don't like conflict, or you're a 2 and you're a pleaser and you want to just please everybody and be pleasing to people, it's very hard, or you're a 7 and you want to raise the positive energy, or a 6, you're afraid people are going to turn against you, right? It can be very hard for you to be direct. And 5s, I think, could be very direct and honest because they don't care either. So yeah, I think 8s can be very direct and straightforward. And again, so that's a strength when it's used appropriately. But sometimes maybe it can be a weakness if it's not tempered. If it's not tempered, you could come across as harsh, hurtful, rude, angry, and then you might find that your own workers are turning against you, and you don't understand why, because you were just being honest. By the way, I think Billy Joel is an 8. Listen to his music from that perspective. Think about his song Honesty, right? You remember that song? I can find, people who will tell me whatever I want to hear, but honesty, that's what's really hard to find. Somebody who'll be honest with you. Just listen to his music again. I think you'll see he's an 8. All right. Anything else that I didn't cover that I want to say? I think that pretty well covers what I wanted to cover today. So until next time, guys, be present to life. For an 8, what does that mean? It means to be present to life means maybe not everything is an argument to win. Maybe not everything is a challenge to overcome. Maybe some things are just to be enjoyed. And, everybody's not to be protected or to be fought against. Everything's not a conflict. Everything's not a challenge. Some things are just there to enjoy. And if you can let people talk about ideas and concepts without getting into arguments and bantering, by the way, 8s banter because they love you. They banter because they care about you. If they didn't care about you, then they wouldn't spend any time arguing with you, because they don't argue with people that don't matter. You don't go up to people on the street and start arguing with them. You argue with people you love from an 8's perspective. So being present to life means letting that softer side, that 8 goes to 2, right? In their health. In their unhealth, they go to 5, which is like going out and reloading their weapon, reloading their arguments, reloading their energy to come back, And 8s also, you'll see them go to that investigator mode. They back you up into a corner and they said, hey, you were supposed to be here at 12 o'clock. Where were you? I called your office and you weren't there. I talked to your friends and they said they didn't know where you were. Investigator mode. See, under stress, you'll see an 8 go down into investigator mode like that. But then you might see them just check out and say, peace out, I'm done. And they'll just leave. They'll just disappear and they'll go dark. Like a 5 just withdraws. You'll see this assertive 8 just withdraw and they've just had enough. They've had their fill. You'll also see 8s go to 2, when they're loving and being gracious and being compassionate and taking care of somebody, protecting someone. I think being present for an 8 means, of course, they trust themselves and they believe in themselves, but it's maybe putting yourself on the line and letting yourself love and be loved, knowing that makes you vulnerable. But if you don't let yourself be vulnerable, then how can you really love and be loved by others? And so kind of get out of that shell. I always talk about 8s being like a fort, and they keep their safe people on the inside and everybody else is hostiles or settlers out there, and other people out there don't matter. What matters is that we keep the safety of this fort, right? Well, in some ways, 8s themselves are like that little fort. They got this hard protective shell, and inside, they've got this soft, vulnerable person that's built this wall around themselves that's so tough and so strong, because why? They're self-protective. They're afraid of getting hurt. So to be present to life means you got to come out of your fort sometimes, and you got to love people. And that means you might at times get hurt. You might at times have to be vulnerable with them. And, that can be a challenge for you. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Have a blessed day.